What's up YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Dennis, I'm the mod scientist, and today I'd like to talk about a little bit of a different subject than I normally would. Because so far this channel has been all about modifying and building electric guitars, but for the past couple of weeks I've been wondering if I should expand my horizon a little bit on that subject. So as you may have seen in one of my previous videos, I recently bought a Jet City amplifier, which is awesome. It's designed by Mike Soldano. It's made in China, but it's a rather easy amplifier once you pull it open. It's really nicely laid out and it's a wonderful amplifier. And I started wondering if maybe I should do some modifications to that, because that sounds really interesting to find out. So what I've been doing is I've been listening to the Truth About Vintage Amps podcast with Skip Simmons, and I've also bought a couple of books like this one by Gerald Weber, and this handbook by Jack Darr, and even this book on designing tube preamps by Merlin Blanco, if I pronounced that correctly. And well, right now I'm pretty much convinced I should dive deeper into the world of modifying, maintaining, and possibly even building tube guitar amplifiers. It's a subject that's pretty close to all my other interests, since I'm basically a physics engineer. The electronics parts and the physics parts just fit the bill for me. That's something I will be exploring a lot more of in future videos. So if you're interested in that, then hit that subscribe button and perhaps even hit the bell to get notifications whenever I upload videos on modifying or maintaining or even building tube guitar amplifiers. However, while I was exploring the possibility of modding tube amplifiers for a little bit, I suddenly realized that my current tube amplifier, which you see right there, doesn't really fit the bill for me anymore. It's a nice amplifier. It's using Kettner Tubemeister Deluxe 40, which I bought 4 years ago. It has some nice sounds, it has loads of features, but I will explain in a minute why I decided to get rid of it. First of all, a disclaimer: I'm not saying that the amplifier is bad. It's a really good amplifier by any means. It has lots of great sounds, great tones, loads of features, but I'm looking into something more traditional. Okay, before we continue, I'd first like to give a warning. Don't just take your amp apart like this, because there are some very high voltages. It can be up to 300, 400 or 500 volts DC inside, and there are some big capacitors inside which can hold their charge for a very long time. So before you do this, unplug the amplifier, leave it alone for like 15 minutes or up to an hour, and then you are safe to take it apart. First, let's get over this amplifier. If you're unfamiliar with the Deluxe 40, this is a 3-channel amplifier. It has a clean channel, crunch channel, and a lead channel. With the clean having its own EQ, and the crunch and the lead channel share an EQ. All channels have a gain and a master control, but there's no presence or resonance or anything like that. It has loads of inputs and outputs and options in here. You can see 2 foot switches, one for channel switching and one for the effects loop. Then it also has a direct line out, together with some speaker emulation, which they call the Redbox AE. It has a tube safety control system, which monitors the output tubes. And then it has a power soak option, which allows for the wattage to go down from 40 watts to 20 watts, 5 watts, 1 watt, and even a complete power soak for silent recording. And then of course you have your speaker output in here. The amp uses 4 EL84 power tubes to deliver a total of 40 watts. And it also uses just two 12AX7 preamp tubes for all three channels. And this is what I think either the rectifier tube or for the phase inverter to send the signal to the power tubes. My first problem with this amplifier is, even though it's a tube amplifier, as you can see it uses two 12AX7 preamp tubes, it is not a fully tube powered amplifier. You can see that there are actually a couple of op amps inside this amplifier. So not all of the gain is created just by the tubes. It's actually sort of a hybrid amplifier using both tubes and solid state amplification and clipping. Now, if you're particularly interested into vintage amplifiers or boutique amplifiers, then this solid state stuff is just way too difficult to deal with. I'd rather have a purely tube based amplifier without any of this solid state type stuff in there. Now don't get me wrong, I mean, we guitarists, we love solid state clipping and amplification. I mean, all of us have overdrive or distortion pedals on our pedal boards, which all of them are using like diodes and transistors and op amps to create distortion and clipping. But I'd rather have that in a pedal than in the amplifier itself. That's just my personal taste. Yours might be different. Also, if you look at the inside of this amplifier, if you want to do any type of amplifier maintenance, this is just a mess to deal with. I mean, besides just the amplification circuits, it has so much mess to deal with. There's loads of PCBs in there, with even PCBs mounted on top in here and sideways. It's got the LED strip on here. Yeah, so if you're an amp tech and you get this on your desk, most of them wouldn't touch this because this is just way too complicated. If there's any type of problem inside the circuit, any components gone bad, well, good luck finding it because it's going to take you a lot of time. And that's my main complaint with this amplifier going forward, getting interested in tube guitar amplifier maintenance and modding and stuff like that. This isn't a platform to do that. This is nice as a modern high gain amplifier. You get your tones out of it, but don't expect to do any modifications or any type of maintenance on this. Also, I have some concerns about the durability of this type of amplifier, because as you can see here, the tube sockets for the power tubes are directly mounted onto the PCB. Now, there won't be a problem immediately, but in the long run, that is going to be a problem. Basically, in 20 years time, odds are this amplifier will simply not work anymore, because what's happening is that these power tubes tend to run hot, and that heat is dissipated through the socket onto the PCB itself. So the PCB, it can warp, it can crack, you got solder joints that could break, and as you can see, they're not easy to reach. Directly mounting your power tubes onto the PCB is a guaranteed failure in the near or far future. So this is a nice amp, but it's not a durable amp. This will never be a vintage amp because it will, at some point, it will simply stop working. So those have been my technical considerations for putting this amp up for sale. But other than that, the sounds also don't really appeal to me anymore. I don't find them very inspirational. Whenever I play it, I don't want to keep on playing. So I'm looking for something that has that certain type of magic that this amp doesn't have for me anymore. So what I've done is I've put it up for sale and I listed in the ad that I'm just looking to sell it, not interested in a trade. But incidentally, someone in the same town as me offered me a trade for an amp that I actually was very interested in. So this afternoon I will be trading in this amp for another, so stick around to see what I got. And this is what I traded it for. A PRS MT15. If you don't know this model, this is Mark Tremonti's signature amp by PRS, and it's one hell of an amplifier. This is an all tube amplifier, like where the Tubemeister had two 12AX7 tubes and a couple of op amps for the preamp. This actually has 5 12AX7 tubes in the preamp and no solid state configuration whatsoever. Also, the user Kettner had four EL84 power amp tubes. This actually has two 6L6 power amp tubes, and right now they're pumping out 15 watts of power, which can be switched down to 7 watts. But I heard the designers say that basically you can transform this into a 50 watt amplifier if you want to. Let me show you the inside of the amp, because that gets me really excited. First of all, let me show you the front and the back. This amplifier has 2 channels instead of 3 channels on the Tubemeister Deluxe. It has a clean channel and a lead channel. The clean channel is very Fender-like, and the lead channel is supposedly very triple rectifier-like. So this is more of a metal amplifier than the Tubemeister. The guy I traded with was actually more of a jazz player, and he complained that this amp had too much gain for him, which is pretty obvious actually, since it's Mark Tremonti's signature amp. And he was looking something a bit more mild and warmer than this amplifier. And he actually really liked the user Kettner. He thought the clean channel was a lot warmer and the crunch channel was a lot more usable for him, so he really dug it. And I tried this amplifier at his house, and I just really thought this was more my taste than the user Kettner. So this was a really nice trade. Looking at the back, you have a couple of nice features, and not too many, not so crowded as with the Tubemeister. So here you have the foot switch for the channel selection. You have 3 speakers out. You actually have some bias points, which is really nice. So you can do the bias adjustment on the outside. Then you have a switch to switch it from full power, which is 15 watts, to half power, which equals to about 7 watts. And the way they do this is there is an internal load resistor that you activate by putting the switch down. And then it also has an effects loop on the back. And then when we look at the inside of the amp, it looks really clean. It is really easily accessible. You just unscrew these 4 rubber feet, you remove the plate, and then you have all the insides available to you. As you can see, there are only 3 PCBs in here. One which has the effects loop mounted on it, one with the speaker outputs and the bias controls on it, and then the main PCB which has everything else on it. And first thing to note right away is that the power tube sockets are actually mounted to the chassis instead of to the PCB. This is already a major advantage over the Tubemeister. So like I said, since these power tubes generate a lot of heat, the heat gets partly dissipated through the tube sockets, but they're now attached to the chassis, so the heat just spreads through the metal chassis instead of through the PCB. So this is very durable, it's hand wired, you won't have any problem with this in the future. The preamp tubes and phase inverter tube, they are mounted onto the PCB, but they don't generate that much heat, so that shouldn't be as much as a problem as the power tubes would be. So this is actually fine, and I'm not worried about this. The layout of this amp is very neat and tidy. On the left side you have the power amp section over here, you have your fuses, and this is all of the preamp circuitry with the power transformer underneath here going to the outputs. Also note that these external wires are actually shielded. That's just an extra attention to detail right here. As you can see here, this is the load resistor that you engage when you switch it from 15 watts to 7 watts. That means half the power will be dissipated through that load resistor. So like I explained at the beginning of this video, I'm very much interested in tube amplifier maintenance and modifications, and this just makes me really happy. The layout is really nice. Everything is well organized, and this is really easy to maintain. And already I'm starting to think about possible modifications for this. For instance, with this push-pull pot, you engage the boost on the clean channel, but that's the only way to engage it. So I'm already thinking about maybe changing up the foot switch input and make this a stereo input, so I can connect the boost switch to the foot switch as well. So finally, let's hook it up and see how it sounds. And this is with the least amount of gain possible on the amp. So it's still very gainy, but also very articulate. You can still hear all the notes ring out. And it's very quiet as well. Listen to this. I'm not using a noise gate or anything. So once again, I have absolutely no regrets trading my using Kettner for this amplifier. I love the sounds, both the clean and the lead channel. This distortion is much closer to my personal taste than the using Kettner was. The using Kettner was a bit more compressed for my taste, and this amp is a little bit more articulate. You can hear the notes ring out a lot better, even at high gain. So I like that a lot. So yeah, once again, no regrets. I love this amplifier. And I also might just open it up and mess a little bit on the inside, specifically trying to get this boost, which is now a push-pull pot, also assigned to a foot switch knob. So if you're interested in that, then stick around on this channel for any future videos on that. And yeah, since it's also an all tube amp, it's also nice to just open up and just take a look inside, see how everything is working, and also use this book as a reference to just get to know the inside of a tube amplifier and get to know how it works. So thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, maybe hit the subscribe button for future content on this channel. And I hope you have a nice day, and I hope to see you next time.